Well, Wolf, James Comey's book doesn't come out for another 5 days, but we're beginning to get some blockbuster details of what he has written in this new book. And obviously, these are things that are going to get under the skin of the President Trump. Among the things that Comey discusses is his infamous now meeting his first meeting with the president in 2017, when he went to go brief him on what is now known as the dossier of Russia allegations, Russia collusion allegations. And the thing, according to Comey, that President Trump was most focused on was this episode that allegedly was caught on tape between him and prostitutes in a luxury hotel in Moscow back in 2013. This formed the most salacious allegations that were contained in the now infamous dossier, alleging that the Russians had compromising material on the incoming president. I'll read you just a part of what the Washington Post says is contained in the Comey book. He says, Trump strongly denied the allegations, asking rhetorically, I assumed, whether he seemed like a guy who needed the service of prostitutes. He then began discussing cases where women had accused him of sexual assault, a subject I had not raised. He mentioned a number of women and seemed to have memorized their allegations. Wolf, these are the types of things that we obviously had heard about, that this was a very uncomfortable meeting in early 2017 as the incoming president was being briefed not only about the threat from Russia, but also other national security threats. And James Comey pulled him aside at the end of this briefing with his top intelligence officials and decided to brief him on a summary of what the FBI knew about this dossier of allegations of Russian compromising information that they claimed to have on him. And obviously, this is where their relationship began to immediately sour. We now have heard from the president who claims that he thought that James Comey was trying to essentially blackmail him to hold something over his head. Comey describes a different reaction, obviously, from what we're seeing in this book.
And you're getting, Sarah, more bombshell quotes from this new book.
That's right. When you see the Washington Post quotes, again, they've an early copy of the book. You can tell that the president was really focused on this tape and the notion of golden showers. Apparently, in one of his conversations with James Comey, according to the book, the president says, I'm a germaphobe. There's no way I would let people pee on each other around me. No way. He also brings it up in another phone call. This one was apparently on March 30th, 2017, according to this book, saying for about the fourth time, Comey here is referring to the president, he argued that the golden shower thing wasn't true, asking yet again, can you imagine me hookers? Comey writes of this call. In an apparent play for my sympathy, he added that he has a beautiful wife and the whole thing has been very painful for her. He asked what we could do to lift the cloud. And obviously, look, the White House knew this book was coming. They had been working alongside with the Republican National Committee to try to figure out how they were going to respond to this. And I will tell you, in one of the talking points that was going around with the Republican National Committee and their supporters today, allies of the president, they bring up what they say are Comey's bizarre decisions as a way to try to discredit the former FBI director. And one of the things they bring up is the notion that Comey would pull the president aside, then the president-elect, and brief him on this now infamous dossier. From the RNC's perspective, from the White House perspective, this is all full of salacious, unverified information. They feel like that was a very bizarre decision for the former FBI director.
And Evan, if the president was angry at Comey before, when he goes through these details in this new book, he's going to even be more furious.
Right. I think that's right, Wolf. But look, I think beyond the salacious details, which is obviously the thing that is going to get all the headlines, there's a more serious side to this. Obviously, Comey's book, he says that this book is about leadership and essentially profiling what he has done through his life on leadership. And one of the things he brings up, according to the Washington Post's reading of this book, is this, again, the fact that he was at this meeting where the incoming president was being briefed on the serious threats that are facing this country, including the threat from Russia, which had just, according to the intelligence community, carried out an operation to disrupt the U.S. elections. And according to James Comey, he says that nobody on the Trump team really asked any follow-up questions about Russia. They didn't seem to be interested in talking about that. Instead, what they were more interested in is talking about how to spin what they were being briefed about for the public after the meeting. Obviously, the public was going to be learning that the incoming president was being briefed by his intelligence chiefs. And so I think that reading from Comey, his description of what happened at that meeting, I think is going to be the undercurrent that's going to carry through this entire book. His description of how he viewed this president and how he viewed it in comparison to his experience with Barack Obama.
Right, I think that's right, and I think that you can tell in the reading of these quotes just how preoccupied, then the president-elect was with a number of different issues, not just the notion, when he was pulled aside and he was briefed by James Comey, which of course CNN was the first one to report that the then FBI director decided to brief the president on this, but, Trump is clearly preoccupied with sort of the golden shower aspect of this, but also with all of these allegations he'd been facing at the end of the campaign. The fact that he keeps bringing up these accusations that women have made against him, which were not included in this dossier. There's another quote in this book, according to the Washington Post, and it has the president saying, there was no way he groped that lady sitting next to him on the airplane, he insisted, and the idea that he grabbed a porn star and offered her money to come to his room was preposterous. I mean, these were the conversations that President Trump and then President-elect Trump was having with the FBI director at a time when they were trying to impress upon him, hey, look, there is a hostile foreign government that was trying to interfere in our election. And
Wolf, I mean, keep in mind, again, we were the first to report that this briefing had occurred and what was contained in the briefing. The first reaction from the White House, if you remember, when we reported this story, was to deny that the president had actually been briefed on the dossier. They said that had not occurred, that this was an intelligence briefing and that it had not occurred. It wasn't until we followed up and described more details, saying that this was a one-on-one meeting between James Comey and the incoming president, that finally their responses or their denials finally fell away. And I think it's important because this sets up, the pattern that we've seen with the White House, beginning on that first day when we reported this story, where they said that something did not occur, which we know had occurred. And again, it goes back to this idea that the president was obsessed with certain parts of this dossier. He wanted to make sure that people knew that this wasn't true, but he also was very obsessed later on with making it clear that he was not personally under investigation, which Comey, of course, made sure he knew.